Today in the podcast, we have George Andreas. George is the national sales manager at Bank of George. And no, they didn't name the bank after him. George is one of my first ever mentors in SBA. He's the guy who named me Pizza Boy, or AKA Soda and a Slice. And he was very instrumental in helping me get to the next level. He's ex-CIT, ex-GE, and he's just a wealth of information about growing SBA production. So I'm excited to have him today, so stick around. Thank you for joining me today. It's been a little while.
My pleasure.
How have you been?
Yeah. I'm good. How are you?
Good. You got a new gig. I want to talk to you about that in just a second.
Sure.
But by the way, do you do many podcasts?
This is my first, Ray.
Wow. Taking your podcast virginity.
Debut with you.
Very cool. Well, I'm honored. And we'll get into our background together because we have a little history.
For sure we do. Yeah.
The one thing, or one of the things I've always found super fascinating about you, George, is like some of these BDOs would just follow you anywhere. You're like the Pied Piper of BDOs. And you were, I don't want to say the best because I don't want to offend other sales managers I've had, but like you were one of the best sales managers I ever had. And
Thank you.
I know at least one of them followed you probably like at least three places.
It's actually 5, right? Yeah, it's 5. And it could have been more, except that I paused a couple times for his benefit.
Yeah, that makes sense. But it's common in our industry for groups to follow kind of one another to different shops, but that's like a whole nother level.
Right. Well, it's about loyalty and understanding each other, I think. And the person you're referring to, he and I started out together as BDOs in the 90s. And just grew admiration for one another. And we knew what we were looking for, and we kept trying to create it. And actually, one of our stops, we kind of did create it when you were with us at Home Bank. That was a special moment in time for however long it lasted. Maybe it was a year or 18 months, but we did some tremendous things in that time frame. And it felt like, the production, it felt like a really healthy shop for the time I was there.
When you look back at Home Bank, which is no longer around, so I think we can talk about it
pretty freely.
First of all, we were already up and running, and I was hired by a different guy, and you came in pretty much midway or early on in my like maybe 6 months into when I was there. So what were those talks like for you to come in? Like, what were they looking for, and what were you expecting before you got in there, and was it the same when you got there?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I had talked to them years prior, when CIT blew up. So I think that was around 2012, and they had offered me a job, but I felt some uncertainty at that time about where that place was headed, and I didn't take the job. Fast forward 3 years later, you were there, and probably 6 of our other colleagues, roughly 6 BDOs, right, Ray?
Yeah.
When I took the job.
That's right.
Right. I think there were 6 of you all. And I was at a time in my life where I was okay making change and taking some risk. And I assessed that deal as high risk, but also high reward. What they offered in their offer letter, it was basically, kind of a crummy base, but the upside was tremendous. So I did it. I first of all, I discounted the upside because it was ridiculous, and I knew I wouldn't get there. But I said, if I do 40% of this, I'm still going to do exceptionally well. If I recall the numbers correctly, you guys were just struggling to get deals done. And I think you had, the year before I got there, I think you had produced, whoever was there, they did 8 million in volume the year before. And I came in midsummer, and they had already done 10 million with the folks that were there, and probably we're going to do, something like 20. Anyway, I took the challenge, and we rebuilt. We put key people in place, and we hired we were able to go national. I think that was the game changer. we put some good BDOs in locally in the state of Florida. We worked through some folks that weren't working out there, and then others like yourself, I don't know, you just took off. I mean, I remember us having discussions. I remember looking at your pipeline. I hope you don't mind me saying this, but you had a
No,
lot
please
of
talk
deals in
freely.
there, and you could tell you were a good hunter, but the deals were small from what I recall. And yeah, they were small. I remember a bunch of pizzerias. I remember nicknaming you Soda and a Slice because you were like the king of
I had
pizzerias. I'm like,
yeah, for sure.
yeah.
No, I've told everyone about this, so it's
Okay, good,
fine.
because I just shared it with whoever's listening. But it was a very proud moment in my career because you called me one day and you said, I need your assistance. I need to get to the next level. And we set a plan in action and we executed on the plan. And we went out on calls together. I remember, I think it was January, and together it clicked, right? I remember being super jazzed up. I think we got like $10 million in looks in 2 days. And from there, I felt like you just needed steering at the time. And like you were basically a diamond in the rough. And, look what's happened. You just continued to excel, and you were my first hire at ReadyCap because of it.
Oh, thank you. I remember setting up a day of meetings or 2 days of meetings. I do remember that like it was yesterday. I would schedule about 6 meetings, and I remember scheduling it, and we would just run from one to the other all around town, and we'd leave with deals. And I was like, this is easy. Like this
Yeah.
is, but when you were in the meetings with me, that was my first look at like, well, what do people do in these meetings? Like, because I was a 23-year-old, with limited experience, and it was a lot, and I still do this today. You were telling the story of the shop, and that stories resonate with people. So still to this day, I always default to, I'm just going to tell you the story and then see if you want to do business with me.
Right. And I think that it's because we're there listening to their story as well, right? So they should hear ours, and hopefully there's a connection at some level, right? So that home bank experience, I think the next year we finished like 75th in the nation for some small bank in Florida that just was struggling to do SBA loans. I think we did like 74, 75 million. We had BDOs everywhere. We brought Pete O'Hearn in to
Right.
manage BDOs elsewhere. And there's a funny story about Pete and I think this is interesting to share with everyone. In our industry, people follow each other, like you said, Ray. So Pete and I were East and West sales managers at CIT, kind of the last 2 sales managers to go away when it collapsed. And then I went to work for Pete actually before Homeback. And then Pete came to work for me at Homeback.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah. So it's interesting. And those are the types of relationships you value. Once you realize that you have, a like-minded person who with the same values, and, and I think what the cool thing is, you put aside titles, right? I went to work for Pete. He went to work for me. Neither one of us thought once about what we were named. We just had a common goal of growing the business together. And we knew our core values were going to be the same. And so that's kind of cool.
I mean, we definitely grew production there at that shop, but it wasn't easy.
No.
the
No.
the approval process, I remember, was extra tough. I mean, I had a very hard time, and I think ultimately it's why it was so easy for me to leave was just it did so much damage on my relationships that I had been building. When you walk into committee and it's like, oh, come back next week. The committee, they were brutal there. It was very tough with a committee of folks that did not understand SBA.
Yeah. And I don't know if you recall, Ray, but the process there, which was not sustainable, and we should share this. The process was you all would bring in deals. I would pre-qual them. We would get them into credit. But then me, in the beginning, it was just me, or somebody had to site visit every single deal.
Right.
So imagine now we're going national and we keep that policy in place. We got to site visit every single deal. And I, as the sales manager, must present the credit to committee, not the underwriter who underwrote it and interviewed the customer, not the BDO who's intimate with it, but the sales manager. So like if I had 5 deals go to committee Wednesday night, I'd have 5 packages and typically a glass of scotch. And I'd have to read through those packages and become intimate enough with them to articulate what you were trying to get across the finish line.
And that's not the best use of your time as.
No, no, and not, also I wasn't the best person to deliver the message, right? So I was learning what, took people 3 or 4 days to fully understand. I was reading a credit and trying to present it. I knew the general deals because I let them in, but that was not efficient. And my time, if you did a deal down in your neck of the woods and I was in Tampa, that was a day for me.
I mean, I remember that it was crazy, the traveling. Well, and it's really hard to build out a shop the right way and really do your job when you're being micromanaged or there's just roadblocks in the way. And
yeah, I was just going to comment, there's services that can go do the site visit for $150 instead of me flying, driving, wasting a day and having everybody backlog with pre-qual requests. That's not efficient.
They were very old school. We use those site visits at ReadyCap and then here. For sure. But when you signed up for the job, did you expect that there was going to be these kind of roadblocks in your way, or did they I'm trying to understand, like, did they bait and switch you with the gig that you signed up for?
No, because I honestly thought that they were hiring me for my national perspective and the ability to attract national talent on the BDO level. So I thought that they would take my guidance on certain things. And then I found out that, as much as or don't know, if it's their way or the highway, that's it, right? You got to live with it. So, but I never imagined, when the footprint got so big and you were ordering appraisals and business valuations, that you actually needed a human being to fly to North Dakota to look at a deal, but that's the thing about small banks that try to go national. It's a totally different mindset. It's just, they have to get used to, you mean I haven't met the customer in person and I haven't seen the property in person. If you want to grow your business, you're going to have to embrace the fact that that's not happening.
And you have to wear a suit and tie.
And you have to wear a suit.
So old school. Like. So you were talking to me about you were working with that other BDO in the 90s. Was that at GE?
Yes, we started at GE Capital together. He was a BDO in Orlando and I was in Tampa. So it was easy for us to see each other. Most often we reported to the same manager, who was an amazing guy. That whole thing was amazing, that experience at GE. And some of the younger folks might not even remember GE Capital, but back in the day, it was a force in the finance world. It was bigger than CIT. It was stronger than CIT. It was an excellent place to learn how to sell. They did a lot of sales training. They did Socratic training too, which I really liked, because I like that style of selling, that mentoring, the consultative approach. So my friend and I had the opportunity to go to Danbury probably 3 or 4 years and go to their executive management training program and learn a lot and meet other folks around the country. GE was just a top-notch shop. Everybody who was there, I think, to a person, really misses it.
Yeah, I always hear great things about it. How many BDOs did they have? Like 50?
Yeah, they hovered around 50. And we did, so this is back in the day, we had, my boss managed 8. And so back in the day when I started, the maximum loan size was $1.2 million. And then it went to $2 million. The maximum 7A was $1.2 million. And then at some point it creeped up, but we were doing over $130 million in Florida, just 6 or 8 of us, back in 1990, 2000, 2001. That was a lot of 7A volume.
I mean, it seems like it was like those were the glory days.
They were. It's interesting because I often wonder, because my best year was 2003, and I did $22 million, and I had 2 kids at home, and that was a lot of volume back then, because it was a lot of units, because you couldn't do a $4 or $5 million deal. You were pretty much doing $1 million to $2 million deals. So it was the glory days, and I often think, why is it so hard for me to find a $20 million producer right now? I mean, they're not easy to find. And the answer is the world, it's just a different playing field right now.
Well, yes.
I made my money going to banks. In Tampa, Florida, there was me and maybe 3 or 4 other SBA lenders. And I just made my money going to my friends in conventional banks and said, here's our deal. I'll take your scraps and you can have my A stuff. And we lived harmoniously in that world, which is actually the reason I left GE too. They changed their model and started going after the same types of deals that my friends were giving me. So we became competitors in many respects. So anyway, the reason is right now, everybody's trying to do their own 7As or get in the business. There's a ton more BDOs out there. There's also more opportunity and there's more awareness of the benefits of an SBA loan. And I think PPP actually exaggerated that and opened other people's eyes. And now we're seeing folks have record years and shops have record years. And I think that's why.
I agree. There's a lot more competition. It sounded like when GE and CIT, there was like a few big national players.
Yeah.
And that was it. I mean, if you were one of those, CIT, GE, I mean, those were the shops that were getting it done. And now it seems like there's 200 players in the space or whatever it is. Back then, they were training on sales, like you said. I mean, it was a sales organization. Is anyone doing anything like that today?
Other than managers that were trained that way, I don't think so.
Nothing formal.
I don't think there's formal training like that. No, there definitely isn't. But there should be, right?
Right.
And even if you outsourced it, even if like a company the size of ReadyCap outsourced, sales techniques for their sales folks, I feel like some of these big shops are so focused on, all right, what'd you do last year? What can you bring in the door? What can you bring in the door today? And they're looking for seasoned folks that can put premium income on the books immediately. And I kind of look at it differently. I want somebody who can produce, but I also want somebody that's maybe doing consistent 8 to 12 that with some coaching and a good culture, credit culture and bank culture, they can get to 12, 15, 20 with my assistance and the assistance of a functioning team.
Well, how do you do that as a manager? Because it's just something that I struggle with understanding, because now that I'm going into management and I know how I did it, and you know how you did 22 million back in the day, you can't really just sit there and tell them, do this because it worked for me, right? I mean, you have to kind of figure out what works for them. How do you strike that right balance?
So I think it's self-reflection. Like there's lots of different types of BDOs that can be successful. And for instance, you and your background and your demeanor, I knew that you would not be afraid to interact with people, right? And go sell and ask. And that's what you did. You went and asked for business and you made people aware of what you did. But others, and sometimes the fit isn't right? So there's lots of BDOs in big shops that do very, very well. But if I were to bring them to the Bank of George and ask them to deliver the goods for me, they would not be able to.
By the way, the Bank of George is a real bank. George just happens to also be named George. Yeah. And we're gonna talk about that later, but that's hilarious.
I didn't buy a bank.
You're right though. And a lot of the big producers come with a lot of drama.
That's for sure too. So because I was blessed to be in GE and CIT with some major producers, I had the opportunity to talk to them about joining me. And then I would have to have discussions with the shop and say, okay, this is the type of business. These are the behaviors around that individual. And this is what it's going to feel like to your shop. But here's what you're going to make off of this person. If you're willing to do all of this, are you okay with that? And because it's eyes wide open, and it should be for both sides on all of this. I've been heavily involved in interviewing lately, and the most important thing I think a BDO that's interviewing for position and the bank that's doing the interviewing is, show them your book. This is who we are. We're not going to do this and that. Don't make promises you can't fulfill, because then what happens is there's disappointment, there's deal declines, I've passed up on several folks, and they've passed up on me because it wasn't, I know them, we really like each other, but it's not a good fit. And you have to acknowledge that it's not a good fit on both sides without feelings being hurt, because you're doing each other a favor.
100%. And that's really smart how you're doing it. And it's really interesting that based on the BDO's production, if they can consistently produce at a certain level, it almost seems like there's a shift there with, like, if you're an $8 million producer, the shop wants to know, like, okay, you're going to come in, we're going to help you, you're going to do the types of deals we want to do. But when you get to a certain point, like 30 million, let's say, you're coming in and you already are what you are, it sounds like. And it's like, does the shop want that or not?
Right. At 30 million, you've found the recipe, right? For you, your personal recipe that's delicious, and you shouldn't change it. The shop has to accommodate you. And that's why it's very important for you to interview your shops as well. And, shops sometimes don't mean it. They get excited. They find the guy and they want them. But when they say things, you got to be able to back them up. For example, right now where we are, we made a strategic decision to hold off on ground up construction till we get our sales team in place. And the reasons for that. It's draining on this. You gotta build it up, you gotta build it out, and then you've got to be able to perform. And if you throw in a bunch of construction deals and you don't have the proper staff, everybody else suffers. Right?
We're doing the same thing.
Yeah, it's just good sense. We want to do construction. We're able to. The bank actually wants it, but there's a time and a place, right? So that's what we're doing. It's
that measured approach. When you're trying to grow, you have to do it a certain way, which is smart. Most people fall into the trap of just, hiring a bunch of salespeople, letting them run wild, and then it implodes.
Well, think about it. A lot of these places, they start up and they're like, okay, we're going to get our PLP license. We're going to put a commercial lender in charge or senior team lead in charge, and we're going to figure it out as we go, right? But it isn't easy. SBA lending is not simple.
Have you ever hired a big producer and then they just stunk?
That's a good question.
I mean, if not, it just goes to show your kind of interview process is up to par.
I could share something that comes to mind when you ask me that question. I met with, at the time, Chris Riley was the president of the CIT SBA Small Business Lending Division. And she and I were talking, and I said, and it was a shift. It was after 2008. And I said, Chris, we're going to have to shift our business model, because we were doing tons of startup restaurants, and we did a lot of startup franchise and a lot of BizAc. And I said to her, we're going to have to make a shift into real estate and real estate refinance if we're going to come out of this, because I know money's tightening, and I just knew that the appetite for the types of deals was going to shift. And she said, well, and in the meantime, we were laying off. So the sales force was 100 people, and we were laying off 20 at a slug every January. So in January, you get a phone call HR, and I'd be on the line. Hi, this is George. You're done. Here's HR. It was the worst.
Dude, that has to be like the low point in your career, I feel like.
Oh my God. So I was only kept on, we were fake lending back then. CIT corporate would come in and say, okay, we're going to allot 140 million to you guys to lend out this year. But we did $1 billion last year. We did $1 billion last year. So we would have, they would cut people 20 at a slug, and they would cut sales managers. Now, the beautiful thing is those guys had awesome severance. They really did. So that's how my territory grew from Florida to the, I just kept taking over for managers that left. But the point is, I said to her, you're going to have to make this shift. And here's the thing, Chris, your A team could very quickly become your C team, depending on the types of business they bring. And she said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, there's a guy doing, a ton of burger franchises, and he's your number one producer. He did all of that, if not 90% of it, in that arena. His numbers are going to tumble. And if he can't shift, he's toast. Sure enough, he was toast. And so that's kind of what I mean. It's like that guy was an A producer, but then things happened, right? And if he went to a shop that was pure real estate and they didn't probe, where's your volume, he would fail miserably.
It's also a lesson in diversification of your referral network.
Right.
So Did you have any thoughts of when COVID first hit, here we go again?
Yes, I was actually optimistic. I mean, I was fearful at the time. But in the beginning, it was just an unknown. And I remember, okay, we got to set up a PPP program. We did that. And that was, I think everybody in the business will say that was the most draining time in my life. Now, emotionally draining was the CIT wind down, because you were kept on to keep people's morale up, right? And morale was tanking and families were being disrupted. It was awful. But so from the emotional side, that the '08 downturn was the worst, but physical work effort was PPP. But I said to our senior management at the time, I was at Evolve Bank and Trust, I said, we got to prepare, because every time there's an economic stressor that in my career, it's been a real opportunity for SBA. So we need to be prepared. When the dust settles and we know the playing field, we need to attack or be ready to go get business. And sure enough, I think 2020 was very profitable for many successful SBA lenders.
Last year was the biggest year in 7A history.
Right.
This year is, this year's confusing, to be honest, because you're facing all these headwinds. It's such a unique time, a lot of challenges, but also that's where conventional lenders kind of tighten up and SBA comes in to kind of take more ground.
And I believe that's going to be the opportunity. You're going to get a group of clients that are entertaining SBA financing that never had to before, right? If there's a pinch, how can we improve their cash flow, right? Or if the bank is tightening up, we can relieve that pressure for you. There's real opportunity in that. And if I was a BDO right now, I would be focusing on that big time. And I would also say this to BDOs who might be fearful of the interest rate increase. And this is from memory, but back in the day when I started, there was a 6-point spread between SBA lending and conventional lending. So I was lending it at about 12. I think these numbers are right. Someone can correct me if not, but I believe I was doing floating rates at 12 and conventional lending was at 6, in the 6s. That's how it looked. And yet we were very successful, all of us that. So don't panic about the increase. There will be a negative impact, but there's also going to be positive impact because certain folks are going to be attracted to this.
And so you mentioned earlier that you're doing a lot of interviews right now with.
Yes.
Is it just for BDOs, correct?
Well, in steps. So our shop, this is kind of unique. Bank of Georgia is the 20th largest SBA shop in the country, which is pretty amazing. And they got there specifically and primarily through hotel finance. They do a lot of it. They're very good at it. They have a process that's unbelievable. It's just really, I've submitted 2 deals because I didn't have any BDOs. So I played BDO for a couple, and it's just amazing the response time. So what they have in the back room is super. But what I'm hired to do is create a different channel of non-hotel deals. So I'm looking for generalists. And for now, because they have this built up shop, I think we have 6 or 7 underwriters right now. They can handle my deal flow until I build up the team. And the team is building quickly. I'm pretty excited. We're going to be up to 4 by next week. And we just started in January, but these are really super high quality BDOs. So I'm looking for BDOs, followed by, we're going to need closers, BDAs as we grow, and underwriters, but also construction. We're going to build up the construction department.
You're the national sales manager, correct?
Yeah, I'm national sales manager.
But they have you recruiting for all positions like that?
No, but we're a team. So if we know somebody, so we're all in. So the approach here is, and everywhere I go is, I like the BDOs to meet the closing manager, the credit manager, and my boss, as well as HR.
Before they come on.
Before they come on, and it's not face to face right now, but it's these Zoom calls. I want everybody comfortable with the team, and I think that's how you build a team.
That's smart.
I ask, and I remember at ReadyCap we did this too, underwriting, closing. We all met the BDO candidates because if somebody sees something that you don't, and they're uncomfortable with it, you need to respect that and at least have a discussion.
Do you have a centralized location where you can bring BDOs to right now? Because
Yeah, we're headquartered in Las Vegas.
Oh, so that's where all your underwriters
Yeah.
and okay.
So a lot of folks work remote now, but we are headquartered in Las Vegas. So the bank headquarters is there. We have a branch in Las Vegas, and we have a branch in Henderson, Nevada.
Do you like Las Vegas?
Funny story. I went to UNLV my first year of college.
Really?
Yeah, I was 17 years old, and my parents put me at UNLV.
I feel like Vegas is a great spot, but if you go there like 10 times, like you're just sick of it.
It's a 3-day jaunt. I'm kind of tired on the third day. But I mean, there's more to Vegas now than the Strip, really. The Strip can get to you, in my personal opinion, can get to you after a couple days.
In your interview process, how does that go? Like, what are you trying to figure out from a candidate? Like, what are you really trying to figure out before you hire someone beyond just their production and what's on the resume?
So what matters to them, what motivates them. So if I can figure out what matters to them personally and professionally and what motivates them, not only can I see if my style fits them or but also how to motivate them and direct and guide them. And also the product offering, not their volume, but specifically who they're calling on, and is there a benefit? I mean, does what I offer match up with their referral sources? Because if it doesn't, that's a bad fit, right? And there won't be volume.
Right.
But another thing I'm trying to do, and I'd like to share with folks, is I'm trying to find, the next Ray, right? Young guy that grew into the business, and we're getting very seasoned in our industry. I'm going to hire 12 BDOs this year.
Oh, wow.
I'd like to find 2 or 3. I actually identified one recently, but he went elsewhere, which is kind of a disappointment. But there's I want 2 or 3 that can be mentored, and you can't do much more than that because you're focused on volume. But if you bring in seasoned BDOs that also have the desire to help and share, then they can help me mentor the young guys. They can go out on calls with them. They can show them the ropes and also show them a different style, because my style is pretty unique.
One of the things that every BDO deals with, and I just wanted to get your take on it, especially when you're interviewing, deal fallout. Oh, I did 7 million, but I could have done 18, but like these deals fell out.
Yeah. It's interesting.
But it happens every year, how do you view that?
What are you implying? That's maybe not the problem of the bank? Is that what you're saying?
I'm thinking you have to account for deal fallout. Deals are going to fall out. And so, maybe 7 million fell out this year, but 7 million is going to fall out next year. And I just had, in the last week, I had 5 million fall out of closing. And, I had 2 proposals. I got kicked in the groin this week with a couple of the proposals I put out. Didn't win those deals. And that's another 2-3 million. So I lost 8 million in essentially 2 weeks. And, I'm still going to do, I'll say 30 million, but probably 45 million because I am expecting this to happen.
Okay. So let me ask you a question, right? If you do 45 million, right, this year, and you did say 45 million last year, on your resume, are you going to write $45 million producer? But I sent in 12 million that they didn't like. My friends did 48 million of my deals. I could have been a $200 million producer if I was in the right job. I'm making a joke, but honestly, that's what you see. And it's not the best strategy, in my opinion. When I look at that, I see like, okay, how much did you really do? Okay, maybe 1 year and you changed banks. But then I want to look back and see that, yeah, I did do 12, I did do 8. And there is no frustration mentioned in every single shop. You get these resumes where people have been there 2 years and everybody sold them a bill of goods according to their resume. And they could have done better elsewhere. And all their friends got rich. And they did 3 million every year. So you have to use discernment. You have to kind of look through that. I also would advise those who want to get into the business or just starting, when you put your resume out there, don't put like, I was a commercial lender with knowledge of SBA and combined I did $40 million. because then I'm going to ask for your pipeline and find out that you did 2 million of SBA and you did 2 apartment complexes. That doesn't, it's, you gotta, we're all trained to read between the lines. Put your true production and just put your desire. I experienced SBA lending, and this is the path I want to take now. I have credit skills. I know how to sell, and now I want to do it in this world. That goes over a lot better with me than, throwing the word SBA into every job. Like I spoke to the SBA one day, or I started up my car, so I know how to do startups, that, stuff like that.
And that's fine because, if you did find someone with fire in their belly and they don't know the SBA in and out, it's much easier to teach somebody SBA than it is to teach them how to have a fire in the belly.
So you just hit on it. It's the fire in the belly. I think you're born with it in general. And you can get passionate about this business, but folks that are entrepreneurial have fire in their belly. They're not afraid. They're not afraid of change. They're not afraid to figure it out. They don't need a retail branch, right? They don't need a network of feeders. If they find one, that's wonderful, but they just want to succeed. They're also not afraid to take a smaller base to make more money. That's another cool thing. I tell this story at times, including at ReadyCap in the beginning before they opened the floodgates. I was restricted on what I could pay folks, and I still got some real quality people that were willing to take a risk basically on a startup and make a different base than they were used to. I've had folks give up market president roles to become a BDO because they didn't care about the title. They wanted to make money and be an SBA lender. I've had folks drop from $130,000 base to $85,000 because they believed in themselves and in the product that I was offering, the bank's delivery system, that they would make a lot more. And sure enough, that market president made $100,000 more his next year than he would have if he stayed a market president. And his business card says BDO.
When I came here, I had a slight drop in base, and my title went from like vice president, senior business development officer to just BDO. I made a lot more money, and I had a much better year, and I grew as a professional, and it was the right decision.
And, for some people, and I'm not disparaging it, in the banking world in general, titles are given out pretty, there's a lot of VPs in the banking world, right? But that's how they rewarded folks back in the day. It wasn't monetarily, it was with titles. So if being president of a division matters more to you than optimizing your income and, the prestige of, it's prestigious to be named president. It's an honor, right? That you worked so hard that somebody considers you're capable of running that division for them. But when all is said and done, if you're not compensated for that, there's a lot of headaches that are non-sales production related, right? You're responsible for everything, the infrastructure, the people, and some folks just want to go out and do deals and build the sales team.
I'll leave you to go on with your day here, George, but I want to hear about this new venture. So Bank of George, national SBA shop. Tell me about it and tell me what you're most excited for.
This opportunity came to me unsolicited, like 7 months after Devolve made me president. And I told the recruiter, it's gonna have to blow me away. And he said, I just want you to talk to them. So I did, and I had a really positive discussion. And I'm like, wow, these people seem authentic. That's what I walked away with. They seem authentic and real. And one of the things that impressed me most is they acknowledged some mistakes were made in trying to get this channel up and running, the non-hotel piece. They basically said, we tried to put everything through our hotel process and it caused challenges, right? And I said, well, that's cool. And they're willing to listen and do it differently. And I remember in our second interview, the team that was interviewing was taking notes as I spoke. And in the third as well. And actually the president of the bank was in the third. And he was asking me very specific SBA questions and writing. And I'm like, wow. So they just seemed super committed, of high integrity. What I learned is the group in Vegas, they all worked together at another bank in California. They've known each other for many, many years. They brought each other together, which is obviously something I do, right? And And then I said, I was in a luncheon in Vegas. I said, raise your hand if you followed Miss P from California. And like 8 of her employees, 8 out of 12 raised their hands. They moved to Vegas for this team. So the feeling I had of this place is employee focused. You can see it throughout the company, the way they treat one another, the way they talk to one another, the way they treat the president, the way the president speaks to us all. For me, who's very passionate about people and driven by like interaction, human interaction, and caring for my employees as well as my customers, this was the place for me. So I just felt, and I'm like, wow, you're willing to let me just run sales, pay me to run sales, grow this thing, and I don't have all the other responsibilities, and I get an unlimited upside, which matters to me because I'm putting the burden on myself to make money, right? I don't have to worry about what some other division of the bank does that would impact my pay. I just go forward in sales. And this place is, they've verbally spoken to the fact that they want to be a top 10 lender in the next 3 years, from 20 to 10. And if you look at the spread, it's big. So they're committed. Yeah. They're very committed. And one other cool thing, if I could share this with you, Ray.
Please.
I talked about my mindset and the types of deals I could bring here before joining. And I got the verbal nod on it, and I knew we were in alignment. But the day I showed up, our credit manager said to me, by the way, this mindset was approved by the board. I thought that was going to be my first fight, right? I, get this, fight for what we're able to do. He said, this is what we've gotten approved for you. Now tell me how many BDOs you need, and tell me how much support staff you need. And here's the comp plan. What do we need to do with that to get the best talent? It was like, what? And so, that's very
rare. It's
rare. And so people scratch their heads like, well, why do you make that move? That's why. It's completely focused on excellence and growing. And there's a commitment and integrity throughout. And that's what I love. And I always try to find.
They actually want to do what it takes. A lot of banks want the production, but they don't want to do what it takes or listen to the advice.
Right. And as you and I know, at some banks, when you get them where they need to be, and then they think they can do it themselves and save a bunch of money, we see what happens, or it can happen, right?
That's right.
That's right.
I've seen that a couple times.
Yeah, we've seen that once together, actually.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to get you in trouble on the podcast, George. So I'm
that ship sailed long ago, so we're fine.
Well, it just sounds like a different opportunity for you, and I'm just so excited about it. And I'm very excited for everyone that gets to work with you, because you are just a pleasure to work with. You've always had my back, been a great mentor, and the frickin' bank is named Bank of George. This has to work.
Well, I just found it so nice of them to consider that in my offer letter, that they would be willing to change the name of the bank for me.
Dude, it's jokes you have at least a year worth
of jokes. Oh
my
gosh. So the first marketing piece that came out was like, hey, meet George at the Bank of George. Because I'm the first George. There's over 100 employees and I'm the first George. So I'm loving it.
Incredible.
Yeah. If there's anybody out there that would like to find a new home, that wants to be part of something pretty exciting, please reach out to Ray or me and we'll talk.
Yes, I can highly recommend George. So I'll leave your contact info in the show notes so people know where to find you.
Thank you, Ray.
All right. Thanks for coming on, George.
All right. Thanks for having me.
All right, that's it for this week. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode of The Art of SBA Lending. And if you have any feedback or suggestions, email me at ray@artofsba.com. Until next time, ta-ta.